This is the story of Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker, Part 1 of 5. Now we left off at the end of Post-Shadowbringers, where Zenos murdered Emperor Varis and had Gaius framed for it. Also, Telophoroi towers are appearing all over the place and wreaking havoc. Let's get started. The Scions meet at the Rising Stones to recap what just transpired at the Cartano Flats. Alphinaud says it started with the appearance of ominous towers throughout the world, summoned by an organization called the Telophoroi. They are causing rampant suffering and are said to be made for triggering the apocalypse. Anyone approaching them becomes enthralled and enslaved and ultimately fuel for summoning primals. Of course, the hero is protected by the blessing of light, but the same is not true for the other Scions. Meanwhile, in Garlemald, the current Emperor Zenos murdered the previous one and flung the Empire into chaos. Urianger reports that the people of Garlemald have become tempered slaves, building a monstrous tower out of the former palace. Tataru bursts in and says they are ready to depart for Sharlayan. The Scions meet at the docks in Limsa Lominsa.
We're set to sail! All aboard for Sharlayan!
Please, be careful.
The next morning at sea, the hero gets a special visitor on deck.
And thus do we meet face to face at last.
It's Hydaelyn, manifest as a woman. She tells him Zodiark was created to stop the first apocalypse and she was created to bind him, but 7 shards have rejoined, strengthening Zodiark and weakening her. She says she's going to fulfill her promise and that the hero has a monumental conflict coming. They land in Sharlayan and speak to an official to gain entry.
Would you be so kind as to process our entry applications?
Sharlayan is a reclusive city of scholars. They are very strict in their policies of non-interference in foreign affairs, and the Scions may be denied entry. So they go as assistants to the students of Baldesion working under Krile and are approved. Krile takes them to the Baldesion Annex, and she suggests the Scions use it as their base of operations for the time being. They gather for a meeting.
Come what may, we must prevent the Telophoroi's plans from coming to fruition.
Krile says there are 2 paths they must take, and the Warrior of Light is needed for both. The first is to investigate what is going on with the Sharlayan Forum, as something is amiss. The second is that the students have received a formal request from an alchemist in Thavnair who needs the Warrior of Light for an important experiment involving the Telophoroi towers. The hero chooses the Sharlayan Forum lead first. Krile says she believes questioning the council directly will be fruitless, so she's going to browse the archives for info on the end times. The Scions browse books at the library for a few hours. After hours of study, the Scions take a break outside and make conversation. Allisae, who grew up in Sharlayan, says she's not welcome in her father's home, but hopes to one day mend the rifts in her family. G'rahatia says he was born in Garlean-occupied Corvos, but to conceal his ancient Allagan ties he was raised in Sharlayan. Alphinaud and Krile talk about how in the previous final days, the people summoned Zodiark to quell the calamity. Y'shtola says that Fortunault, the council member and Alphinaud's father, denies that this is the end times or that the Telophoroi are a serious threat. Allisae and the hero leave for the Last Stand, a local cafe, to have late-night tea. Allisae greets an old friend working at the cafe. Telling him they're looking for info on the final days, but no one seems to want to talk to her, the friend suggests they serve drinks for a while and make casual conversation with the clientele. One of them mentions that the Gleaners are far busier than usual lately, and then explains that Gleaners are workers who procure books and rarities for Sharlayan. Allisae and the hero sit away from everyone to relax and talk. Allisae talks about how her father has disowned her, but G'rahatia told her once that maybe it's really about keeping her in the dark about the forum's business. She then spots a boat ferrying several boxes through the city.
They must be ferrying goods to Labyrinthos.
She explains that Labyrinthos is a massive living library under the city. Remembering the comments earlier at the cafe that the Gleaners have been working extra hard lately, she gets the idea that maybe in Labyrinthos they can get more clues about what's going on. Allisae and the hero head back to the Scions to report what they've learned about the Gleaners. They decide to head to Labyrinthos, where the rarities are stored, to investigate further. Krile explains that the whole sky and weather system is artificial and they are actually underneath the city.
Aren't those people Gleaners?
As Allisae points out the Gleaners, the party splits up to question them and get more info.
Ugh. I must be a bit dizzy from the descent. Let's get to work, shall we?
Discussing with the Gleaners directly, it is confirmed that they are hauling unprecedented amount of goods lately. The heroes also learn this increase in labor is coming from the Forum, but they don't know why. Next, the heroes head for the Archaon's vaults to have a look. At the vaults, they are told access is now restricted and they're denied entry. This surprises Krile, but there's nothing they can do, so they leave. Running out of leads, the hero approaches Erenville, the gleaner they spoke with earlier, and helps him capture a bird. After capturing the hornbill, Krile is curious why Erenville needs this bird. He explains that normally, returning extra creatures to their natural habitat is a major part of Gleaner's work, but then he says this case is different. He's been instructed to take it below to the restricted area.
The projects down there are the subject of rumor and hearsay.
He hasn't been told why, and as a Gleaner, he only gets glimpses of what the Forum is doing, but he really doesn't know. Y'shtola says they need to find a way down there, but Erenville says he has no way to help them. He then mentions a dangerous mineshaft they could brave through if they're willing. The heroes clear through a mineshaft to reach the lower level. Now the team asks questions around Marial ergonomics, the area where agricultural studies are conducted. Off to the side, the hero notices some incredible flowers. A botanist approaches and explains that these incredible flowers, called heartblooms, are attuned to ambient emotion. He says they are very difficult to find and little is known about them.
A flower that reacts to one's feelings. Strange.
Allisae finds the flower fascinating but wants to get back to the investigation. She points out Erenville in the distance. Y'shtola says he's about to speak to a Forum member and they should eavesdrop on the conversation. Krile still can't take her eyes off the heartbloom.
Almost. I can almost reach you.
Y'shtola spontaneously turns the hero and two others into toads. She then tells them to eavesdrop on Erenville's conversation with his employers. Erenville meets with the Forum member.
Another lengthy list.
He complains that they are being worked extra hard with no explanation. The Forum member says he hears his concern but cannot reveal anything at this time.
All will be revealed in due course.
Erenville agrees to keep helping them for now. On his way out, he spots the odd toads. And he says now they're even.
You may consider my debt to you repaid in full.
The heroes ask how he knew it was them, but he's an expert.
If you mean to impersonate a toad, try studying the real thing.
Returning to the group, Alphinaud gathers that the Forum is doing something big specifically in response to the Telophoroi and keeping it a secret from everyone. Y'shtola says Krile is acting oddly, and so the hero goes to check on her.
She said you would need it for the journey ahead.
Do not worry. She has lent me her body for only a moment.
Hydaelyn speaks to the hero through Krile's body. She says she returned Minfilia's gentle spirit to the sea in the world she loved so well. She says another may yet have a part to play, depending on the hero. She then gives him this flower and says it will be his guide, and he is free to go and believe what he wishes. She then leaves Krile's body.
That was all too brief. Already she seems so far away.
Krile says she felt something reach out to her ever since they descended into Labyrinthos, and she was totally surprised to learn it was Hydaelyn herself. Just then, Allisae cries out and something is wrong.
You can't be serious! We've done nothing wrong!
The hero and Krile run back to the group and find the Forum members questioning the others.
We are aware of your investigations.
Forchenault, the twins' father, calls out the group of them for pretending to be here merely as assistants to Baldesion when they are in fact the Scions. He says the Forum is working on secret and important business and they need to stay out of it. They have already arrested Grahatia for browsing the restricted section in the library. The Scions are then brought to trial before the Forum.
The Forum will come to order!
The chair calls Forchenault to testify. He says they've hidden the fact that they are Scions and they are meddling in confidential Forum business.
Our city. These warmongers sought to meddle with and expose matters of state secret.
He says Krile brings shame to Baldesion, and she responds.
Galuf Baldesion was never one to forsake his fellow man.
She says he would have found any way he could to help other peoples fight back against the coming doom. Y'shtola says Eorzea reached out to Sharlayan for help as a respected ally, and Grahatia says he only went to the restricted section to learn the history of Sharlayan's policies. He noticed a change from 270 years in the past.
No longer was knowledge preserved for the benefit of society. Rather, society was to be gradually reshaped to ensure the preservation of knowledge.
Y'shtola mentions the sacred duty of the Forum, and a member tries to respond but seems unable to speak.
Mind your tongue, Archon. If you had seen...
Montaigne, an old friend of the twins' grandfather, stands up in defense of the Scions. He says they may be fighting the approaching doom, but they are not stirring up the citizens here.
But there exists no evidence of an attempt to incite our citizens to do the same.
The chairman suggests the Scions be barred from conducting their investigations in Sharlayan, but no further action be taken, then calls for a vote.
Let us put this judgment to a vote. All in favor? Raise your hand.
The vote passes, and the Scions are let free. After the trial, the heroes express frustration with the Forum's secrecy. Just then, the twins' mother approaches and greets them warmly. Her attitude towards the twins is completely different from the father's, and she invites them into their old home.
Welcome home, my lady.
She instructs her house attendants to keep this meeting a secret from their father. She tells them she made them new clothes, and they go up to their old rooms. While they are away, she tells the Warrior of Light she's heard so many good things about him. Allisae returns and loves her new outfit.
It's perfect. Exactly what I would have chosen.
Alphinaud returns and loves his as well, and is then gifted some odd weapons. His mother says they are Sage's weapons, and that they were once his father's. She also gives him a Sage Soul Crystal. She then tells him to try and find common ground with his father, and that maybe by the good of Alphinaud's deeds, he will come around.
Let him discover the merit of your actions. After they cannot be undone.
They say goodbye.
Safe travels, my children.
The Scions return to the Baldesion Annex. Krile is happy about the reunion with the twins' mother, and the hero approaches Thancred to assist with his trip to Thavnair. Thancred says they must first meet with a researcher named Kitta. Kitta is developing a way to travel to aetheryte crystals not previously attuned to. She says she has a pair of aetheryte crystals ready for testing, one here in her lab and the other in Thavnair. She would love for them to test it out. Only 3 of them try Kitta's new system, since Estinian is already attuned to the Thavnair crystal. They line up near the crystal and she clicks a button.
You might experience a teensy-weensy touch of violent ethereal sickness. Good luck!
Arriving in Thavnair, the 3 of them feel awful, but Estinian is fine.
I've seen fairer faces after a bout of bad shellfish.
Estinian leaves to get them some water, and Thancred says Krile left a note saying Estinian is terrible with money and should never be left alone in the market. In Thavnair, the hero struggles to reach Estinian before he pays way too much money for simple goods. He manages to spend 9,400 gil on a hair tie. Anyway, the group splits up to ask around town and see what they can learn of the place. It turns out this merchant town has had hard times recently, and everyone is struggling. This is because a Telophoroi tower has appeared in the area and no one comes to this port anymore. He meets an Arcasadara, a humanoid elephant creature named Matzia, who is desperate to sell some fish. The hero feels sympathy for him and helps him sell his fish around town. Matzia is very thankful and leaves for his home. Reconvening with Estinian and Thancred, they mention that people have been turning up missing because of the tower, and decide to follow Matzia since he's traveling alone. They catch up to him and end up making conversation about the tower. Matzia says that horrible creatures, resembling their deities, but truly being nothing like them, have been coming from the tower. They decide to accompany him to his home village to get more info. At their home village, he shows them a scroll depicting their 3 main goddesses, the Manusia sisters. He also reveals that in their city Radz-At-Han, their ruler, called the Satrap, is rumored to have a guardian dragon that aids him in time of need. After departing from Matzia, they seek out a famous alchemist named Nidhanna. They find a bunch of alchemists lying on the ground outside and wonder what went wrong. Then a small Aura man named Varsan appears with a basket of scales.
We have new scales?
The alchemists immediately jump to their feet and crowd around him, saying they can now resume their work. Estinian notices these are dragon scales. Varsan assures Estinian that the dragon scales were freely given by a dragon allied with the satrap. Nidhanna, the brilliant Arcasadora alchemist, greets the Warrior of Light and welcomes the group to her lab. In Nidhanna's lab, she explains they've been working on Dragonscale talismans that nullify the effects of the tower. The hero then escorts her to obtain more ingredients she needs for the talismans. They arrive at a place called Kajaya's Footsteps.
The faithful citizens huddle inside the city walls, and commerce has all but ground to a standstill. I pity the satrap, the trials he must be facing. And it was the satrap himself who entrusted us with this duty. We will not fail him, nor our countrymen.
fools attempting to ward off its tempering influence with magic trinkets. And yet, I find myself deathly curious. And I, as ever, am my own worst enemy.
Back in Nidhanna's lab, she learns they are out of another necessary ingredient, Giant Skull, and she asks the hero to pick some up at a nearby outpost. The hero then travels with Varsan to an outpost station near the tower. He speaks with troops of the Radiant Host, soldiers under the command of the Satrap. They say this tower is known as the Tower of Zot, and they are eager to see if the talismans will work. Finally, the hero picks up the Giant Skull from the stockpile nearby and heads back to Nidhanna. The hero gives her the Giant Skull, and she says the talismans are almost ready for testing. The hero steps outside. The heroes make conversation outside. Thancred says they're close to a breakthrough. Urianger is moved by the thought of the world uniting against a common threat. Thancred says Fandaniel wants to bring the end of everything in an orgy of pain and suffering, but he muses that we've all had thoughts like this in dark times.
And spat upon by fate and wailing in the deepest pit of despair, who among us can say they have not entertained similar thoughts?
The hero spots Fandaniel for a vanishing moment and tries to find him, but he's gone. Just then, it sounds as though the alchemists have had a breakthrough.
At long last!
The heroes run to Nidhanna, and she now holds in her hand a talisman that will ward off the effects of the tower on the wearer.
With this in your possession, your soul should be completely shielded from corruptive ether.
Urianger praises her for this achievement, but she says to wait until they've tested it in the field. Next, the hero and Nidhanna go straight to the Tower of Zot to test the talisman further. Nidhanna is excited to find herself completely shielded as she approaches the entrance.
Praise be to the sisters, we made it!
Just then, magic chains appear and pull her inside. The hero runs in after her. Inside, Fandaniel tells her to calm down as she is forced into the walls to be used as etheric fuel. He takes the talisman and seems to find it familiar.
The similarities are striking.
The hero approaches, and Fandaniel talks about his ancient past, giving the hero a vision. He says the ancient Allagan researcher Amon, who resurrected Emperor Xande, is himself. He was bored with his perfect world and life of conducting cruel experiments.
For they were ever hungry for stimulation. Slaves to the slightest hint, and amusement was afoot.
He resurrected Xande for a reign of conquest, but after a time, Emmet Selk came to him and called him to his true identity as an Ascian. Eventually, he tired of it all.
Scheme as you like, build as you will, nothing endures.
The hero comes out of the vision and Fandaniel is gone, but he hears him say that if they remove Nidhanna from the wall, she will die. He also says he will see him again.
We shall meet again, but somewhere more suitably grandiose.
The hero returns to Nidhanna's village to tell her fellow alchemists what happened to her. After a moment of grief, Varsan says the Satrap has invited the hero for a meeting at Radz-At-Han. Varsan introduces the heroes to the Satrap. He invites them to sit down, but Estinian senses something.
This charade has gone on long enough. Show yourself.
A dragon's voice is heard saying he is right, and a curtain is raised. There is an ancient dragon, one of the great worms, right there in the room with them.
I am Vritra.
He's the last son of Midgard Sormir. The Satrap explains the history. Before any people came to Thavnair, Vritra occupied the island. As various peoples migrated here, they all revered and respected the dragon, but thousands of years later, they were threatened by new invaders. As war was raging, the dragon arose and quelled the conflict, and oaths of peace were sworn in his name. He has ruled Radz-At-Han ever since. The satraps have been present as a charade for generations.
A charade, yes. And one which my family has performed faithfully for generations.
Estinian notices the worm is missing an eye, and Varsan reveals it is within him, and his body is a vessel for Vrtra's will. The dragon has been giving his scales for the alchemist's research, and he now asks the Scions to destroy this monstrous tower that plagues his land. They depart to discuss the matter. The group returns to the Baldesion Annex in Sharlayan to update the rest of the team. The team updates Krile, and all present agree on assaulting the Tower of Zot.
In my opinion, carrying out Vrtra's request and assaulting the Tower of Zot should be our highest priority.
Now it's time to discuss how. Y'shtola explains that the prisoners cannot be removed from the walls or they will die. Urianger says the towers were summoned of ether and must have a core at the center which can be destroyed. This should unsummon the tower and free its prisoners. Thancred points out that killing enemies in the tower will further harm the prisoners.
Our every victory will only compound the prisoners' suffering.
Grahatia suggests the party split in two, a group of healers and a group that will fight their way to the core. Krile says the plan sounds good, and they agree to meet at the outpost outside the tower. The Scions meet at the beach in Thavnair just outside the Tower of Zot. They don their Dragonscale talismans and split into two teams. The heroes team will delve deep into the tower and destroy its core, while Y'shtola's team will work on healing the trapped people inside, who've been used as fuel for summoning primals. The hero climbs through the Tower of Zot, and after a fierce battle with twisted deities, he makes it to the core. The team approaches the core and feels heavy ether in the air.
I believe we stand in the tower's beating heart.
Y'shtola says ether is siphoned from the land into the core and distributed outward. She also notices a man's limb inside the core. Estinian destroys the core, and the tower begins to collapse.
The floor beneath our very feet dissolves. Brace yourselves!
Moments later, everyone awakens on the island, surrounded by countless sleeping prisoners.
'Tis as if it never existed.
Krile reveals that Grahatia saved everyone at the last instant with a levitation spell, which drained him, but he'll be okay. Thancred is concerned about the prisoners and their minds, but Allisae and Y'shtola say they can heal them with porxies. Varsan approaches and Urianger delivers the good news, but says the prisoners will need help.
Come, let us convey these unfortunate souls to the city.
And part 1 of Endwalker ends there. If you want to see what happens next, check out the story of Endwalker Part 2. See you next time.